Good afternoon and welcome to this season's start to Art History with the Artist and the Librarian. Today's program is going to feature 4 different art heists, and if you have questions, please use the chat box. In March, I'm going to have an art history talk about the art theft by Nazis during World War II, and it's very much focused on the art side of things. I'll have a link at the end of the program for that. So if you want to go ahead and register, I was going to put that into this program. There's too much information. I had to divide it into 2 different talks. If you're interested in learning about the theft of Caravaggio's Nativity with St. Francis and St. Lawrence, we have covered that one. So it's on the Northwest Regional Library System Florida YouTube channel. It's called the Dark Art of Caravaggio recording, and you can watch that at any time. Okay, so we're going to begin with one of the most famous heists that you may or may not have heard of. It takes place on August 21st, 1911 at the Louvre in Paris. So the Mona Lisa by Renaissance painter Leonardo da Vinci was stolen. This theft is one of the reasons why her smile is so famous. And the morning of the theft was a Monday, a holiday when the museum was closed for maintenance. And it was a full day after the theft before one of the regular patrons noticed that it was not hanging on the wall. Instead, it was just 4 iron pegs on the wall. So this is the artist and regular museum attendee was Louis Bührle, and he would come to the Louvre and he would like set up his easel and he was actually paint and he would sell reproductions of the Mona Lisa. He asked a security guard where the Mona Lisa had gone, and the guard just kind of like brushed it off because at that time they were also, the museum was taking photographs of a lot of the pieces in the collection. So they would take the pieces up to the roof to get photographed in natural sunlight. And so it took a second to realize that, nope, it's definitely not up there. It's not getting photographed. It has indeed been stolen. So the Louvre theft made global headlines. 8 days after the theft, Joseph Gary Perret went to the newspaper offering a reward for information about the crime. He admitted to stealing small statues from the museum. And at this time, like the museum, there was a little bit notable of how bad the security was at the Louvre. And there were several different stories of like testing out the security. But Perret had actually stolen several small statues from the museum. But he claimed that poet Guillaume Apollinaire and Pablo Picasso, which I'm sure you've heard of him, were involved in having stolen the painting. Pablo Picasso had purchased stolen sculptures from Perret, either knowingly or unknowingly. They were Roman-era Iberian sculptures of heads, and they were in Picasso's Parisian apartment with a big stamp on the bottom saying property of the Louvre. Anyway, so Picasso went to trial, and he openly wept in court. And I don't know if you know much about Pablo Picasso, but he's very like masculine, a little bit of a womanizer, and just picturing him like crying in court is just, it's kind of an absurd scene. He claimed that he didn't even know the poet Apollinaire, and a case couldn't be built for either of them that they had stolen the Iberian heads or the Mona Lisa. So they were never charged with anything. It's just a side story to the story. And the case went cold for quite some time. And then the Mona Lisa resurfaced in Florence, Italy in 1913 by a gallery owner. So Italian Vincenzo Perugia was working as a handyman at the Louvre in 1911, which is somewhat ironic because he was working on building glass cases to enhance the security system at the Louvre, but instead stole the Mona Lisa. Perugia had the white smock worn by staff, and he could have exited the building, kind of maybe wrapping the Mona Lisa in the smock. It's not a large piece. And then he may have had accomplices, he might not have. It varies during different accounts. and he stored the painting in a false bottom of the trunk of a trunk to travel. And he claims that he wanted to return the Mona Lisa to her homeland of Italy. However, he tried to sell it to a gallery owner, and that is why he thought that 2 years or whatever would have been enough for the heist to have died down and sell the piece. However, the Mona Lisa by that time was globally recognized, and that didn't work so well. But he did admit to the theft, and he had a light prison sentence of 8 months. So one of the reasons that the news of the Mona Lisa heist died down was that right after that, you've got World War I happening. So the news landscape shifted. And so many of us know Mona Lisa, but we don't know about her heist. Yeah, I hadn't known about her heist until maybe like 5 years ago or something. I was like, what? It's not something they really chat about much either. So the next heist that we're going to talk about coincidentally happens 50 years at the exact date of the Mona Lisa. So it's August 21st, 1961 at the National Gallery of London. And this is a wild story, so I had to include it. In fact, this heist was even referenced in the 1962 James Bond film, Dr. No, that the villain in Dr. No may have also stolen the piece. And they're going to have a new Sony Pictures Classic film, which is going to be released in 2021, which I can't wait. And it's going to star, it's called The Duke, and it's going to star Helen Mirren and Jim Broadbent. So that is on my list to watch in the upcoming year. And you will know all about the story. However, there's still different takes that you could take because you don't 100% know what truly happens. So this is Francesca Goya's painting, The Duke of Wellington. The actual Duke, Arthur Wesley, fought against the Napoleon's armies in Spain around the time of this painting. And Wesley was known as the terror of the French and later moved up the political ranks, even serving as British Prime Minister twice. So note the historical significance to Britain. And Francesca Goya was a Spanish painter whose work can often be dark and aesthetic. And so the piece that I know him most for is Saturn Devouring His Son, which is really creepy because the Duke of Wellington portrait can be viewed at the National Gallery of London's website, and you can zoom in for all those details. And I thought that this kind of, his eyes, the brushwork in the eyes kind of pair up with that haunting quality of his other works. So this painting was completed in 1814. It stayed in the hands of British aristocracy until 1961. The 11th Duke of Leeds was good at spending money, and his father also had a ton of gambling debts. So he auctioned off the painting for the high price of £140,000, which in today's dollars would have been closer to 2,652,000 or so forth pounds, or 3.5 million in US dollars. It's an expensive painting, super expensive. And it was going to be sold to an American art collector and oil tycoon, Charles Wrightsman. But the British government did not want it to leave the country. So it was bought with aid from the Wolfson Foundation and a special grant created just to keep the peace in the country from the British government for the National Gallery in London. It's a lot of backstory, but it's worth it, and it does all kind of tie in. So 19 days after the piece was officially in the collection of the National Gallery, it was stolen. 19 days. There were speculations of who it could be, so they were just picking all the art thefts and cat burglars and mobsters at the time. However, they couldn't figure out who it was. There was no good leads until July 1963. The thief sends a note to the police that the painting would be returned if another £140,000 was given to charity to pay for TV licenses, which in Britain, TV licenses are a little different than the United States. Like, we don't have to have a license to have a TV and play it. But TV licenses is what they wanted the 140,000 pounds to go towards, plus guaranteed immunity, which the police and authorities did not go for. In March 1965, the thief sent another note that said, "Goya's Wellington is safe. I have looked upon this affair as an adventurous prank. I know that I am in the wrong, but I have gone too far to retreat." He proposed an anonymous return of the painting and didn't want to be pursued. Though immunity couldn't be granted, the piece was returned in May 1965, and now world-renowned art thief surrendered. Okay, so the reveal of the thief, who eluded night security, who stopped by the painting of the Duke of Wellington every 20 minutes, as well as an alarm system, and kept the secret for 4 years, even from his wife. Retired Newcastle truck driver and 61-year-old grandfather, Kimpton Bunton, was upset at the cost that the British government paid for quote unquote 3 pennies worth of old Spanish firewood. Side note, not a big fan of the arts. And he justified the theft because he had to unreasonably pay so much for his licensing for television cable. And yet the government could pay so much for this painting to stay in the country. All he wanted to do was watch TV. So he entered and exited the museum through a window, which is quite impressive for someone who's not a professional thief. After turning himself in, he did receive a light sentencing. They charged him because he did return the piece. They charged him for the frame because the frame was never returned. However, the actual thief portion of it doesn't seem very plausible because he's 61 years old. He was a bigger guy, squeezing through a window to get in. I think it was like a restroom window. You need a little bit of agility. And so it may be his 20-year-old son, John Benton, that actually did the theft, but he kind of took the fall for it. And it was still his cause, but I'm not 100%. And you might have to do some more research on that. And so therefore, watch The Duke when it comes out in 2021, and we'll see if it gives us any more clues to what really happened. Next theft we will look at is February 10th, 2008, at the Bührle Collection in Zurich, Switzerland. The theft of 4 Impressionist masterpieces from this private museum collection. This theft is valued at $160 million. The foundation was established by the family to showcase Emil George Bührle's collection of European sculptures and paintings. He was a German-born arms dealer for the Third Reich. So a side note, and this kind of refers to our next talk in March, which is that 13 of his paintings in his collection were French Jewish origin, and they were returned to former owners or descendants. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about similar stories in March, but I just wanted to highlight his more controversial past, even though it's not related to the thefts. So 3 armed thieves broke into the E.G. Bührle Foundation wearing ski masks at 4:30 p.m., which is an odd time to do a heist. In 7 minutes, they stole 4 pieces. One held the security guard at gunpoint and had the visitors lie down, and the others grabbed the paintings very quickly. So it most likely wasn't stolen to order because of the fact that all the paintings were very close to each other. So it was an easy to grab them all. And as we're going to go into next, the actual recovering of the pieces was a little sloppy. So it doesn't seem like a professional job. The pieces also are so notable that it would have been near impossible to sell them. Okay, the first 2 pieces recovered were Monet's Poppy Field near Value and Van Gogh's Blooming Chestnut Branches, which are beautiful, stunning pieces. They were located in a parking lot in an abandoned white sedan in front of Zurich's Psychiatric University Clinic several days after the heist, so it wasn't long at all. And this is a location that's also very close to the museum itself. They were in good condition. They weren't with the other pieces. It was too isolated by themselves, and they were still in the museum glass. The third piece in the theft was The Boy in the Red Waistcoat by Paul Cézanne. The painting was valued at over $100 million, and the thieves tried to sell at $4.6 million, which was a bargain in comparison to a rich Serbian buyer. However, the Serbian organized crime investigators were tracking the case, and when the police checked the suspect's vehicle, once again, another vehicle, which is so weird, the Cézanne was found inside like the roof upholstery, and it was like slid inside of the roof upholstery. So you wouldn't see it from underneath, but you could see it from behind. And I think you can find some news footage of that one, which is kind of interesting. Recovery took place April of 2012. 4 men, 3 were Serbian, were arrested for the 2008 theft. The mission was dubbed, because of the title of the piece, The Boy in the Red Waistcoat, it was dubbed Operation Waistcoat. And they also located large quantities of cash, equal to about $2 million, arms and ammunition, and only one corner of the piece was slightly damaged. So overall, that's not bad, all things considering. And the last piece was actually recovered before the Cézanne. However, it was crucial for all of that to unfold so they could arrest the suspects. And then it was released that they had recovered it. And it's called Count Lepec and His Daughters by Edgar Degas. And this piece, however, did have a little bit more serious damages, some more cuts onto the painting itself. But all of the pieces were returned to the Bührle Foundation and to be restored. And the director was pretty confident that they could get it looking close to pre-stolen conditions. It's pretty amazing what they can do in terms of restoration. So very strange that 4 of those, 3 out of the 4 were inside of cars. I thought that was really strange. And the thefts themselves went really fast and seamless. However, the recovery process was very sloppy. There was some mention that there may have been a ransom for those first 2 pieces, which makes a little more sense in how they were discovered so quickly. So just leaving them in a car a couple of days after the heist themselves. So this is the last heist I'm going to share today, and it is probably the most notable heist and most expensive. 13 pieces, never recovered. And so it's the Isabella Gardner Museum on March 18th, 1990. Okay, so I really want to see the Isabella Gardner Museum. I haven't gone in person, but isn't it stunning? So I want to introduce you briefly to the museum. The Isabella Gardner was born in 1840 to a wealthy family. She married well to Jack Gardner. They had a son, however, he died at the age of 2. So the doctor recommended, kind of to deal with grief and healing, to go traveling, and she fell in love with the arts and she became an avid collector. At the time of like the Gilded Era age, you could even buy antiquities from European market like auctions. And she was so well known in the auction circuit, she would send kind of people in her place to be able to get things at a slightly reduced cost. Because if they saw that it was her, they would probably rise up the price. Many of the elements incorporated into the building itself are actually antiquities. So Italy was a place of influence, especially Venice. And so the columns and windows, they may have been purchased from auctions from actual Byzantine or Italian Renaissance periods. It's kind of like a patchwork of history. And the Isabella Gardner Museum opened in 1903, and she purchased a ton of amazing pieces. And ironically, she was around in 1911 when there was the heist of the Mona Lisa, and she got so nervous because she knew she had quality pieces in her collection. So she really upped her security, and she would even have guards watching 2 pieces in particular, which I'll mention when we get to those pieces, with the order to shoot shoot them if they try and steal the pieces. So she had her guards guarding the pieces very heavily, which flash forward is a much different scene in 1990. So part of the reason why I wanted to mention her collection practice and her museum is that because in her will, she stipulated that the museum galleries were to remain unchanged. None of the art could be removed, added, sold, or even rearranged in the wall space. So when you visit the Gardner Museum, you will see the frames where the paintings once belonged. My library science degree is also museum studies, and so that practice in her will was just a fascinating story to me. So that's why I keep remembering her. The museum itself, if you go to the site, there's the security director, Anthony Amore, and he came on to the scene after. Yes, the Gardner Museum, she designed and built just for her art. So it's such a piece of her. It's not her home. It was just built for the museum itself. So it's almost like a palace for art. And it's in Boston, Massachusetts. So if you do go that way, add it to your travel list. So Anthony Amore was a security director who got hired on afterwards. And one of his life missions is to solve this case. And so he provides a 20-minute walkthrough of what kind of happened and when. And so that's interesting if you want to learn more. The museum had motion sensors that tracked the movement of the thieves. However, they only had video footage right at the front entrances, or where the security guards would have been at the front. Conveniently, the theft happens the day, basically right after St. Patrick's Day celebrations in Boston. So you can just imagine that it was probably like chaotic and wild. And so March 18th at 1:24 a.m. is when the heist begins. Two men, and this is a sketch of the FBI sketch of the men, they're dressed in police uniform and they buzz to be let in. And the security guards are young, 20-something security guards. And often, I've worked at two museums, and a lot of the guards are like artists or students. So I can picture what they would have been like. The guards let them in, but then they were immediately handcuffed to pipes down in the basement. And then the guards were, the thieves brought the guards down, handcuffed them so they were secure. They also wrapped duct tape around their heads, but in a way that they could still breathe. There are some photographs of that online as well. There's no video cameras in the gallery spaces. So we're gonna kind of step through the pieces that were stolen in the order they were stolen. So the first piece is Rembrandt's Christ and the Storm, on the Sea of Galilee. And this is one of the first two pieces. There's another Rembrandt next. And this is one where Isabella Gardner really wanted to protect it. And unfortunately, the two Rembrandts that I'm going to mention, including this one, box cutter right out of the frame. So if you are an art fan in any way, just imagining that is horrifying. The next piece, Rembrandt's A Lady and Gentleman in Black. It's a classic Dutch portrait of a couple. And the thieves thought they were stealing a third Rembrandt because it was mislabeled in a book the museum had created in 1974. However, this painting is most likely a student of Rembrandt's, Govert Flink's Landscape with an Obelisk. This is the other piece that was heavily guarded back in 1911, but maybe not so much in 1990. But this is Vermeer's The Concert. It's a beautiful piece. And Vermeer, who's another Dutch artist, he only made 36 paintings that are confirmed to be his. So he doesn't have like a prolific volume of work out there. And there may be up to 45 pieces that would be his, but only 36 are confirmed. And they did not slice this one out of the frame. They did take the canvas from the frame. So the frame itself was left and the canvas rolled up. Then a small Chinese bronze vessel from the Shang Dynasty was stolen, and it had been attached to a metal base, but it was too hard Like it took them a second to be able to steal it from the base. And it's one of the oldest objects in the collection, 12th century BC, around 10 inches in height, and it would have been a vase. Another Rembrandt, but it's the size of a postage stamp, really tiny. And the thieves, it was basically bolted to some furniture in a tiny little frame, and they had unscrewed the screws from the cabinet and then taken it out. And they tried to take another Rembrandt portrait that was in the collection, but it was a wooden base, and the way that it was attached was too difficult. So you could tell that they were trying to take it, but they were unable to do so. Then they steal 5 drawings from Edgar Degas in another room, and several of them have horses, so there was a little bit of a theme there. 3 mounted jockeys, Le Sortie de Passage, which in English is leaving the paddock, and that's the one on the right side, which is my favorite. And then Procession on a road near Florence, and then 2 charcoal drawings that were a study for an artistic soiree program, and those weren't as interesting. And then the thieves steal a bronze eagle that used to be on top of a Napoleonic flag. The thieves had tried to steal the flag itself, but the way it was bolted down, it was in a case, it was screwed so well to the wall that they couldn't take the flag itself. Yeah, the range of the pieces are greatly varied, and it feels like they knew where they were going. So they were specifically targeting certain pieces. And this is the last piece, which is a Manet and another gallery space, which weirdly was not detected by the motion sensors while the other pieces were being stolen. This is an impressionistic piece for Edward Manet's Chez Tortoni, and it's a beautiful piece of his like Parisian cafe scenes. It was also cut from the frame. And the last motion detection of this piece would have been when one of the security guards, Rick Abbott, would have made his rounds, which is odd. And the thieves themselves removed the security camera footage from the front desk, and they would have taken like 34 minutes total to get everything from the museum. They left at 2:45 a.m. This became a FBI case, and there was a lot of private investigators as well in this case. I think there's a lot of people who are just wanting to solve it, so it's kind of like a brain teaser to see who may have done it. The Manet theft was an odd moment since it wasn't detected. However, they don't think it's an inside job, though at the same time, FBI statistics say that 80% of museum thefts are often an inside job. Think of the Mona Lisa, which is an example of that. The paintings have and this is just for information, $10 million reward for information leading to the recovery by the museum for the works in good condition. The statute of limitations have run out on the heists themselves, so the thieves might not even get prosecuted, but none of the 13 pieces have been recovered, and these pieces are not just like any 13 pieces. They're really, really well-known artists. They're very valuable pieces in the cultural sense. So it's an ongoing and active investigation. There's so many suspects. So I'm not going to go into the suspect route because there's just too many. The value of the stolen pieces today is about $500 million. Some think there's an Irish connection, like Boston mobster Whitey Bulger may have given the paintings to the IRA. That's like one theory. However, there's no evidence that the pieces are in Ireland. There's other mobsters that worked for Carmelo Berlino, but he claimed he was set up. FBI undercover operations have taken them around the world, and they have had no luck in recovering these pieces. So the director of security and chief investigator at the Isabella Gardner Museum is still actively working with the case with the FBI. In 2013, the FBI released that they knew who did the theft, but that the suspect has died, and now they're just looking for the pieces. Now, I think that the suspect may or may not have died, but they're saying that because the statute of limitations is gone with the heist itself. So they're trying to entice people, somebody to come forward with information about the pieces themselves. That's my theory. And the only definite is the pieces are missing. So that's mainly my program for today. I have a few pieces I wanted to share with you. Becoming Mona Lisa, and they're all in the Northwest Regional Library System collection if you want to read them. So Becoming Mona Lisa, the Making of a Global Icon by Donald Sassoon dives into Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, including the heist and some amusing stories of the Mona Lisa coming home from Italy to the Louvre and kind of pop culture at that time. The Master Thieves, the Boston gangsters who pulled off the world's greatest art heist by investigative reporter Stephen Kirkshin, has several theories about this heist. So if you want to dive into the Isabella Gardner Museum heist, this would be a great place to begin. And he looks at all these Boston gangsters. So if that's what you're interested in, that would be definitely the one to go there. However, my recommendation is Priceless: How I Went Undercover to Rescue the World's Stolen Treasures. This reads like a thriller, but it's nonfiction. And its author and retired FBI agent Robert Whitman worked on several high-profile cases of stolen art and historical artifacts in the FBI art crime team, including the Gardner heist. And he talks about having to go undercover and kind of like mingling with grifters and con men to kind of figure out where these pieces are hidden. And he recovered a lot of amazing pieces. So that is my recommendation out of these three.